minimum number of people and see what we can and can't do. All right, so first up we'll have approval of our agenda. So with that, I'll say just a general amendment of open to juggling as we figure out time. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions on that?
Yeah, just move the information to the.
Yeah, we'll start with that going up. I'll put it between public invitation and business still, so we can still get that part. But yeah, we'll have to put off our minutes until we have quorum.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone okay with that then? We can approve agenda consensus? Cool. All right, so we will wait on approval of minutes until we have quorum if we can. Public invitation portion of our meeting, invitation to any interested persons to address the commission on anything you want to bring to our attention. Have we had any pre-registrations this month?
We have not.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and I don't think we have anything there. So that then will bring us on to an information item filled in time. We have, as our equity nudge for the month, the Friends of the Mississippi River Youth Council, with an introduction by our council member, CM Vento. Go ahead.
I can move your chairs up here and grab it. There are two here already. Actually, there are three. I'll move.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, there's plenty of
We can
room.
pull
to pitch
chairs
in.
up. It's very wonderful environment here.
Okay, I like it. Now we have so many chairs. This is like a comedy. I'm in some episode of like The Office.
That's good.
And if the first time you speak, if you could just state your name for the record, our minute taker is going to be watching the video later.
So, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I've had the privilege for the last 11 years serving on the Friends of the Mississippi River Board of Directors. Friends of the Mississippi was founded in 1993, 5 years after Congress created the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, which is a unique national park. It's unique in that it's in an urban area. It's unique also that it's a partnership park. It's a it's a huge stretch of the Mississippi that goes from the Dayton-Ramsey area in Anoka County down to Hastings, 72 miles, and it was an initiative that began as a result of a lot of vision and persistence by a wonderful man by the name of Tom Kelly. Tom initially wanted to, if I remember correctly, he wanted to have the merger of the St. Paul parks and the Minneapolis parks. Well, that didn't go over well. And so he kept trying to think about what could be done to help clean up the Mississippi River, because there was a lot that needed to be done and a lot of advocacy and protection that needed to be tended to. So he kept pushing, and he went to U.S. Senator Dave Durenberger and Dave's staff, and to Congressman Bruce Vento and Bruce's staff, and with them worked on creating federal legislation to get this park designation. And it passed in 1988, and in 1993, a former staff person in Washington, Peter Gove, was the founder, the original founder of the Friends of the Mississippi River, and it was Peter's goal. He's still on the board yet today. He's younger than ever. His goal was to have an advocacy organization, because making it a national park wasn't going to be enough. We needed advocates for the river, and so that's the role of the Friends of the Mississippi River. 3 years ago, FMR created, I got to make sure I get this right, the Environmental Stewardship Institute and the Environmental Stewardship Institute Council. And so with us this evening, we've got some representatives who are going to tell us about what they've been up to. And I also included, with our information for tonight, this handout, because I thought it would give a good kind of review of the kinds of things that FMR is doing with and for, alongside the youth. The goal is to try and fill that gap between the outdoor experiences that kids get as scouts and students when they go to various parks as part of field trips and other learning opportunities, to fill that gap between those experiences and then career choices. Because all too often, they never learn about the career options that they've got going forward if they're interested in being a part of environmental advocacy. So I will turn it over.
Yep, that's exactly right. And especially in addition to that gap that we see, there's also huge gaps, as we know, systemic racism and other types of oppression. So we're really looking to serve a wide range of diverse young people in the Twin Cities.
And remember,
And my name is Laura Manhill. I'm the Stewardship and Education Director. So I am not on the council. I just am here to support and guide. So they're going to be giving you the presentation today. So I'll hand it over to our team.
Is there a way to move the slide forward?
Just say next slide. Oh, it's actually right
Oh, there it is.
About the magic
There we go.
man.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm Naomi Nickel. I attend the U of M. I'm going to be a sophomore this fall, and I am the ESI program associate. So I'm not a part of the council, but I help support the council and our other youth programs. And I was actually a part of ESI's first summer program 4 years ago, and since then I have also been an assistant with the program, and now I am an associate. So.
My name is Ivy. I go to Roseville Area High School, and my role on the advisory council was the scheduling coordinator, and I'm also an assistant for the summer program. I joined ESI because I was always interested in helping the environment, but wasn't really sure how to do that, so ESI has given me a lot of options.
Hi, my name is Bella. I attend Washington Technology Magnet School in St. Paul. My role on the council is the Community Outreach Coordinator, and I joined because educating my community about environmental issues is something really important to me.
Hi, my name is Ria. I go to Como Park Senior High School, and this summer I was an ESI assistant. The reason I joined was because I'm really passionate about environmental issues, and I wanted to be able to become involved with youth in our community.
Our council was made up of 7 high schoolers from around the Twin Cities. We all had a role in the council that we got to choose. Having roles mean we share responsibility for making sure the council works well by doing all necessary jobs. We go on field experiences once or twice a month where we collaborate with other groups, volunteer, go outside and learn from guests. Our goal is to engage with the natural world, inspire advocacy, educate ourselves and others on environmental issues, practice leadership, and collaborate with the community in order to combat the problems facing the environment.
Our youth council focuses on many issues, but today we wanted to highlight a few that especially impact our local community. First, we have noticed in our time in various Twin Cities parks and spaces that many people don't respect or acknowledge the land they are on. Many parks are littered with garbage, and people often don't seem to care about this or see how it impacts the land and water. This is especially an issue when we acknowledge that we live on stolen Dakota land. Beyond just respecting the earth and our green spaces, we also need to respect the people whose land we are occupying. One way we can increase awareness about the history of the land is to post signs asking for respect, like what's been done in the Mounds Park and Cemetery. Another thing that can be done is to work with Indigenous people to speak to the public to ensure that we are sharing their stories without erasing their perspectives. This is especially important in conservation and environmental work and when developing new spaces in the outdoors. This past April, our council held a trash cleanup and interpretive walk led by Crystal Norcross, a community organizer. Having her perspective and knowledge was a valuable part of the event and helped us to fully understand the history and importance of the site. Indigenous knowledge is finally starting to be recognized and valued in the environmental field and outdoor recreational spaces, but this is just the first step in repairing the harm of colonization on people and land. Another issue we are concerned about is the lack of accessible green space and how it contributes to heat islands in communities of color. In a recent study done by the journal Nature, researchers found that Black and Hispanic residents are exposed to more intense urban heat island effects than white residents due to living in neighborhoods with more pavement and less grass and trees. People living below the poverty line are also 50% more exposed to the effects of heat islands than their wealthier neighbors. This lack of parks and green spaces also connects to a lack of biodiversity in these areas. Finally, we know the lack of trees and open green spaces in communities of color and low-income communities also correlates with other environmental justice issues. In a study done by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, 91% of Minnesotan communities of color and Indigenous communities and 46% of low-income communities are exposed to high levels of air pollution. We also know that these issues are not just problems locally in the Twin Cities, but also nationally.
Across the nations, our park systems are inequitable. The Trust for Public Lands 2021 Park Score rankings found that both Minneapolis and St. Paul have failed to provide equal open space across their entire cities. Neighborhoods with more low-income residents and or residents of color have much less park space. Many people enjoying open spaces may also not be aware that the water we love and enjoy in the Twin Cities and our river and lake are at risk. Nitrates are a potent drinking water pollutant. Just 10 parts per million is enough to exceed the Minnesota Department of Health's official health risk limit. More than 1 million Minnesotans, along with roughly 20 million Americans in 50 cities, get their drinking water from the Mississippi River. Researchers assessed more than 1.4 million miles of river and streams across the U.S. and found that 51% qualify as impaired. Smaller and poor communities lack the tax base for expensive water system upgrades. And lower income households are less likely to have the means to install new wells or expensive in-home treatment devices, and we think that there should be more awareness about this issue, as well as actions taken now to address the current and future risks to our water. We know that as people strengthen their relationships with the Mississippi River or the land and bodies of water they live near, they're more likely to take care of those places.
We know the problems we are highlighting can seem very overwhelming at times, but a lot of the solutions are simple and can start locally. Many youth and young adults care and are committed to learning and innovating ways to design our cities and open spaces to make our lives more suitable and equitable. The last 6 weeks, Ivy and Naomi and I were part of the Esi Summer Intensive program, which is a 6-week program where we supported 20 new ESI high school fellows. We focused on biocultural diversity in rivers, which really highlighted the link between people, plants, animals, water, and culture. Fellows work independently or in groups on a research project connected to the environment. Some of the environmental justice issues our summer fellows brought up were air pollution, water pollution, invasive species, and accessible gardening. Many fellows connected how much humans depend upon the natural world and biodiversity for their own well-being. Spending time outdoors and feeling connected to nature in general has been correlated with increased environmental stewardship behaviors like signing petitions about climate change or volunteering to remove invasive plants in your local park. Many of our meetings took place outdoors in parks such as Crosby Farm and Hidden Falls, which allowed fellows to build connections with the river and the environment.
We envision a world where people care more about and feel more connected to nature, and for all people, especially youth, to feel empowered to take action to protect the environment. We want to see governments and industries take responsibility for the destruction they cause to the environment and work towards solutions by investing their resources and money into what will help the environment long term. Specifically focusing on parks and open spaces, we want to see a world where everyone has access to outdoor spaces and everyone feels safe in them. BIPOC people often do not feel welcome or safe in outdoor spaces, and access to natural spaces is often limited in communities of color and or low socioeconomic status. Additionally, we envision a world where low-income and BIPOC communities no longer experience elevated levels of pollution, especially when compared to white and upper or middle-income neighborhoods. We also want to see a world where people respect natural places and where there are more climate-resilient trees and native species in open spaces, because this creates healthier ecosystems. We envision a world where more parks are created in urban areas and open spaces become more biodiverse. For example, by planting a wide variety of habitat, making plants that provide food for animals and can improve water quality like blue stem instead of just turf grass, because this makes for healthier communities. We want you to listen to both youth and the underrepresented communities when making decisions about the neighborhoods and areas that they live in to help make the communities more equitable and accessible. We invite you to visit our ESI Instagram page at esi.fmr for updates and possible events we hope to plan in the upcoming school year.
Thank you for so much for inviting us to present today, and we wanted to just give you an opportunity to share any reactions or questions that you have for the council where we have our representatives from ESI.
Okay. Any initial questions for you guys? Yes, go ahead, Jeremy.
Thank you. My question is about how people get involved with high school fellows. How is that selection occurring, and is there a way for us to support recruiting new diverse populations into that program?
That's a really good question. It's actually something we have ESI meetings every week as a team, and we were reflecting on our summer program Because we've expanded the number of spots in the past, we had only 12 participants, but we've now expanded, so we have 24 high school openings for the summer, and then we have about 8 fellows. Hopefully we'll be able to expand our fellowship to 10. The school year council to 10 this year, pending an opportunity. We've been partnering with Right Track to recruit some of our fellows. If you're familiar with Right Track, it's an employment program through the city of St. Paul. There's a similar one in Minneapolis, but it didn't really fit exactly as well with our program. So that's one way we've gotten recruitment. We've also worked with a lot of teachers in schools because we do classroom programs, as you mentioned. A lot of the recommendations is teachers telling their students, apply for the program. And then I can tell you about half of the people here are here because of someone else that did the program, or they came to, Rhea came to an event. We hosted a career development day with a watershed district and then several other youth groups. And so that was an opportunity to share, cross-promote different opportunities, depending on your age, your interests. And that's how we ended up meeting Rhea. And so there's a lot of different ways, but it is something that we are trying to reach more diverse populations, and something that came up on the feedback from our fellows from the summer was they are hoping for more transparency and opportunities to learn about this program. So that's definitely something we would love, just more opportunities to share. Anyone can apply. We do prioritize like underrepresented populations, but it is an open application. We used just like a Google form online, and then if someone has different accessibility needs, if someone wants to do the application in a different format, we're happy to accommodate that. We also then would do like follow-up interviews, and I actually conduct the interviews, like working with with Naomi and some of our other staff. So yeah, and the applications usually go out in April for the summer program. And the council, because it's smaller and more limited, we open the applications up first to people who have participated in the program before moving on to like opening it up to a more general population.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But the summer program is kind of an entry point, and then from there, we also have seen some really exciting things this summer. We saw one of our fellows, they joined, they got a position at Mississippi Park Connection, and then we got to collaborate with them. So it's really exciting to start to build. We're really working to build some networks, and that's one of the goals that actually the council set last year. Was this year they really, if you all have connections with other, youth groups, youth serving organizations, we're looking to build some networks so that they can have even a stronger voice. Last year they presented at with Climate Generation, they have like an annual climate summit. So more opportunities to connect with other young people.
That kind of leads into the follow-up question I have, if I may.
Yeah.
Have any of the program participants gone on to serve on commissions, advisory councils, things like that? Because I know Secretary of State is constantly looking for people to fill these appointments. Some of them environmentally oriented or environmental justice or climate change oriented.
I hope so. I mean, we've only been here for 4 years. Okay. We just started in 20.
But that might be a good direction to go.
But that would be the
if you're looking for a follow-on engagement for you,
Absolutely.
Consider applying for some of these open vacancies on advisory councils and commissions, because your voice should be heard.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to step up and volunteer for some things like MPOSC or like Governor's Climate Change Cabinet, any of that stuff.
If you can share also, just some of those opportunities with us, if there's, if you come across things, I
can send you. I get the Secretary of State's posting, so I'll send it to you.
Naomi does a monthly newsletter, so those are things that we can share out, because then we stay in connection with our alumni and we find out what they're up to. But yeah, Naomi's the oldest alumni we have. Yes. So most of our alumni are in college, just starting college.
And it can be challenging to balance those things, but if you're in the area
that is
still,
possible.
It's a great way to do it.
We had an intern who, Akia, I don't know if you knew Akia, but he wasn't an ESI, but he just did another internship at FMR, and he actually did serve on a local council in Minneapolis and had a really good experience.
That's great.
So, but I think that's a great point and something that we can continue to lift up as opportunities. Yeah.
You're also at perfect timing for one issue with that, which is the college thing.
Yeah.
Frequently, if you get people involved in something in high school and then they go to college and then it's just gone. So the trick is to say, okay, yes, we understand that you got other stuff going on for the next 4 to 8 years, depending on who you are, 7.5. But being able to reach out when they hit that like 22 to 25 mark, and be like, hey, remember us? We know
Yep.
about a thing for adults that you might
Yes.
be good for.
That's a great
And
idea.
figuring out, because like a lot of these things that are open on the Secretary of State site, either legally or practically do often have an age requirement of
Sure.
being adults, just because we don't know how to involve kids in some ways. So you need to be able to reach out and be like, so there's this other thing that you couldn't do before, but how do we connect those dots?
Yeah, for
Sam,
sure.
do you want to speak to that? Because you're a college student.
Yeah, I think I had really good experiences working with ESI, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have stayed around for 4 years. And so Laura reached out to me this past winter and said, like, you know, I have a job opportunity for you. And, you know, initially I was kind of like, well, I do have school, right? I'm in college. But Laura did a really good job, and FMR in general did a really good job working to have, you know, only a couple hours a week in the winter or in the spring. And I think a lot of college students are open. I mean, from experience, my friends are all really desperately looking for like internships and just opportunities. And I think people would love to hear about these like open council positions, because I think that sounds like something really valuable. I know one of our summer assistants has done work with her school's Earth group and Progressive Club to like organize a walkout at school that was really successful. So like people are already building experience that I think could be really helpful at these.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm talking about, in addition to the time constraints, is just that so many people go out of town for college.
They leave, yeah.
You're at the U, you're
I
in
am at
town.
the U, yes.
A bunch of people leave, and then they're like, where do I want to settle down? And I'm like, you know what, Twin Cities are actually pretty good.
And you end up
Come
coming back. Yeah.
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 Now, you mentioned the issue of people not knowing about parks and open spaces, or not feeling safe in them, or otherwise not being comfortable. And that's something that our commission has talked about at length for many, many years. It's something where we have a lot of data on people saying that they're not going to parks because of different things. But as people who are using the parks regularly, we don't have a lot of answers about how to change that, because we're not the people affected. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about big things that we could do within the parks that we maybe are already working on, or maybe we haven't heard before, of how can we change some of that stuff? What's something concrete we could actually do, if you know any?
Good question.
I think a lot of parks aren't accessible to those who have disabilities. I know a park near, like where I live, that recently went through like construction to make everything more accessible for those like in wheelchairs, or maybe those who can't walk as well. So I think that's a big thing that can be done. Other than that, I'm not really sure.
I mean, I can give you some concrete examples too. We did a trash cleanup with a group of young people, and our group was, you know, all of us here, we all identify as people of color, and it was a group of kids that were all folks of color, and they got harassed for picking up trash and told to go back to their neighborhood to pick up trash. And why were they picking up trash in this park? And it was really frustrating, because I think there's some really just pretty bad narratives around like when people of color are seen gathering in groups or in spaces, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions about what they're doing. You know, why are we here in this group? Whereas like other folks, you know, white folks can gather wherever they want and do kind of whatever they want in open spaces. So I think one thing that we have done at FMR is like we started a BIPOC River Stewards group. And so sometimes like just creating spaces where, you know, the people that are coming here are all people that want to be out, like affinity spaces, where you're kind of showing up. And we partnered a lot with the City Park Connection to do those events. And then just getting kind of tips from other people that know, like, there's Urban Bird Collective, I don't know if you're familiar with them. We've worked with them on some of our BIPOC outings and events. And I think getting advice from, you know, when you do have those experiences, being able to talk to other people that may have advice about like what parks to go to. I know that sounds like, you know, that doesn't exactly solve your problem, but when you do start to build a network, because we were part of kind of these groups of folks, other BIPOC folks that are trying to do things outdoors, you can kind of hear from them, oh, well, this is a good space to go. This park is really diverse. There's always a lot of different people here, or so kind of sharing, that it's not like an immediate fix to make those spaces more comfortable, but I think that's one way. And then, I think changing the narratives and images that we use. Sometimes the way that we talk about people of color, we say things like, I think there's wrong assumptions that are often made are kind of like generalizations. And obviously none of us can speak for any group of people entirely. But I think, just giving people sometimes opportunities to be in those spaces together in ways that it can feel safer.
So like a lot of it comes down to an organized event, possibly with someone you've also worked with in some
that you have
context.
established some trust with. And
Yeah, I think like throwing an event is like really good because through ESI even I've been like, wow, there's like this park that I've never heard of. And it's like so close to me and I've never been there, never heard about it at all. And it has like a nice picnic pavilion and like a playground. So I think also people just like don't know about the parks near them, or they might know, but they don't have like great transportation to get there. So I think just like if you throw an event, that's a way you can provide instructions of how to get there, and then people can know for the future, like they can go there and then they have that in their minds.
Yeah, and I think especially in like urban areas, a lot of the times like parks aren't like, people don't know a lot about where they are and stuff. Even through ESI this summer, we had a few like tours and stuff at Crosby National Park, which I didn't even know like existed this whole time, and it's just like a huge right there, like a piece of land that's just like tucked in the city. And I think like sharing that more widely would also like benefit when it comes to accessibility for all people.
And we often have to there are maps that the council publishes and they're on the council websites, but obviously some of the people we're trying to reach aren't looking at where we put those things. Are there places that generally would be good for those kinds of outreach, marketing, information kiosk kind of stuff? Besides just people outreach, person to person, is there anything we can do consistently like that would be better?
I mean, I think there are groups on, I know that's not like the best answer, but like on social media, like there are definitely platforms, and I mean, part of it is you have to be a member of that group though to be able to reshare things, but that's how I find out about a lot of events. And I know that a lot of my friends have felt more comfortable trying like activities that they maybe had never done before, like in the BIPOC, there's a BIPOC outdoors group on Facebook, but you have to be a member of that community to post within the group. But there are other groups like that where I know like Locust is more like an example of that. It's like a place that is like looking for groups that are kind of already serving like a diverse community, or like specifically working with that. And I think a lot of it is like building relationships with groups and organizations that might have like intersectional like connections that you might not like automatically come to mind. I think working with Crystal Norcross, she's an organizer in that picture who did that tour with us. I mean, because she led that event, she's a Dakota organizer, she's very well known in the community, she can get people to show up at like just about anything. And because she does I know she does a lot of events in parks and things like that, but she has an organization, like on the east side, and last year helped organize like the Solidarity Festival on the east side. But like, so collaborating with events that are like already existing, or like, fairs that are really specifically, that one was really focused on like indigenous communities. I believe this year they're focusing more on like the Solidarity Festival in September is focusing on like Asian communities of that. And so thinking about like what are some events or other happenings that are already going on that maybe you could plug into that would provide opportunities to like cross promote things. So
Sure. And when you're mentioning the social media groups, I know Linnea at Liz Ingerbritz, our previous council liaison, has a Facebook group she's really active in that's, it's not for a like organization,
Yeah.
it's just
There's not,
BIPOC people
exactly,
that go for hikes on the weekend.
exactly.
And I think as government, being government, we've done a fair bit of outreach to certain community organizations, but I don't think stuff like that, that's really informal, has ever
It's
been
like
on our
informal
radar.
stuff, that's where I get, literally, that's where I look for events. Because I'm like, what's on that feed? So, or Instagram,
Yes.
there's some groups that post there.
So we'll have to figure out how we can get fingers in
I
some
mean,
of those.
it's
somehow.
building relationships, you know, like building relationships and with people. And so then once you have an authentic relationship, people are gonna be more likely to trust you and that they might reshare an event that you're doing, you know, or an
Right.
opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's of course tough to like
I
get
know.
into some of those groups when a lot of us are
Sure.
very much not BIPOC.
Sure.
No. So, yeah, we're,
Well, that's why
Figure
we
out how
need
to
to
do
keep
that.
diversifying
That's
all
right.
these
Yes.
spaces. So that's what we're trying to do.
we're working on it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
Mr. Chair? Sorry,
yes,
Go ahead.
all right, Cecily, and that's it.
The Institute sounds like a great program. I'm sorry I hadn't heard of it before.
Well, it's pretty new still.
Yeah,
We can do better.
and I'm sure, over time, we'll all be watching your graduates do great things. I know when I was in high school in the mid-70s, the only programs you really could do in conservation were like Youth Conservation Corps
Yeah.
and Student Conservation Association. So you're building fireplaces and log barns and things. You really weren't learning about science and working with people and things like that, especially in urban areas. I live right off the St. Croix River. I wish we had a program like that there, so maybe it can be replicated with other
think
friends
so.
groups.
Yeah.
Um,
I know that we're talking with some other organizations that have an interest in like, how can we kind of across different youth serving, or how can we help learn from each other of like how you could do your own version.
Because, and unfortunately, some of the other friends groups in the area really probably can't pull from as diverse an audience, at the high school level, like the St. Croix River. But over time, things will change. So, given the recreation area is 72 miles long? Is that 2 counties or 3 counties?
Oh, I think it's
Ramsey,
more than that.
It
Hennepin?
hits all of them
Dakota.
except for Carter and Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
It's-
also Washington.
Yeah, Washington.
Yep.
Dakota, Ramsey, Hennepin,
Anoka.
Anoka. There's another.
So do you have transportation to help
We do.
the youth get to
Yeah,
programs?
right now, we're using our car because FMR doesn't have a van. But I think at some point we might get too big for our car. But that was a huge barrier, and we even had one of the council members who said I wouldn't be able to go to all these events because, as you mentioned, you can't get to some parks accessibly. Like, there's not a great one of my young people is coming from North Minneapolis, so for a meeting in the east side of St. Paul, it'll take her 2 hours to get here.
Right.
So we did. There's 3 of us that kind of would rotate giving rides and doing like carpooling, and sometimes we would do like Bella and I did a restoration activity out in Rosemont with our council, and so we kind of carpooled to get out there because it just didn't make sense for everybody to drive.
Well, that's great, because
So,
there are no
yeah.
barriers then.
Yeah, that was a big
Oh, good.
a new thing we added last year. Mhm. And then we provide mentors too, which is something I didn't mention. We
nice.
partner with the Minnesota Academy of Science so that they can connect with people that are in the STEM field or doing this work, someone from the B Lab and, people, even we had a presenter though that he was from Cameroon. So, that was really cool.
He was able to present on Zoom about agriculture work he
and
was
water
doing.
systems, and so that's also been really fun.
Yeah. So what's next? What's in the strategic plan
Well,
for?
our next, really is to continue to build more of a network with other groups that are doing similar work so that there is a more, we're part of a group called the Mainstream Environmental Organization Collaborative Pathways. And it's kind of informal, an informal, it's not like an official group, but it's an informal gathering of a lot of different environmental focused orgs that are really looking to build better pathways, because I think if you want to become a teacher or a doctor, it's kind of clear like, how do I do that? But for the environmental field, it may not be as clear of a pathway. So that's part of our plan, is to really be able to, so that we catch people and then to continue to support them. As you mentioned, what happens to them 4 years from now. I want to be able to offer Bella a job, or, recommend her to my friend who works at this organization that has an opportunity, because just sending out emails here and there is not really enough. People forward me these job opportunities, and we don't have a great, we could just do a better job as organizations to make it easier for us to reach more diverse populations. So that's kind of a big part of our next steps.
Sounds good, thank you.
If I could just wrap it up.
Yep,
Sure.
We could take the
I know.
next hour and 20
Other people that need to
minutes.
present.
Right, but first of all, thank you all. And the board at the Friends of the Mississippi River feel like we struck gold when Laura became a part of our team. So special thanks to Laura. She put up with a lot of emails from me and putting this together. The other thing I want to say is feel free to go to fmr.org. There are just incredible, there's an incredible lot of information there. And if you're sitting there thinking, boy, I wonder if they've got any activities for somebody my age, there are lots of great activities throughout the month, throughout the year. I have a brother that lives over in Minneapolis, and I regularly get phone calls from him about how he was out pulling buckthorn and how much fun it was, and over in Theodore Park or wherever. The last thing I want to mention is on the website, there's a link to a videotape, a documentary, about a 26-minute documentary that was done, I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, to tell the story of the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, how it came to be, who the players were. It is a fascinating, I know Emmett has seen it on public TV. I'd encourage you to watch it. It's really quite interesting, so.
Could I say one thing?
Sure. And I think Monica had a question.
Oh, Monica, you go.
Good?
You
Okay,
can go ahead.
Excuse me, I just wanted to thank you and say, the Metropolitan Council has a really robust internship program, so I encourage
great.
you all to apply. The second thing is our park agencies have good opportunities too, and like the whole laddering thing.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You guys are interested here, then internship, then
Yeah, what are
job,
the
and so we'd
pathways?
love to,
Great.
just encourage that.
Yeah.
So, thank you for coming, it's great.
Yes, thank you all.
I also wanted to just mention, thank you, Councilmember Vento, for ordering food. There is it's called finger food, it's COVID safe, but there's tea and a number of other things that we should dive into. And I think the idea is, if you guys are hungry, please jump in, and commissioners and audience members alike. So,
Okay,
thank you.
by all means. I think we'll let you guys hit the food first.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Oh yeah, hey, would it be possible to email us your comments?
Oh,
We
yeah.
really liked that, so that would be great. If you sent it to Councilmember Vento, she could forward it to me.
I can send you that, our notes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right,
Absolutely, absolutely.
So in terms of logistics here, it seems like maybe we're not getting our quorum today. For our business items, it's possible for us to proceed with a non-official thing, or we can punt them to the next meeting. Is there a preference among staff about which we have to do? Are there timelines on these things?
Well, I would turn to the agencies. First of all, I apologize to the commissioners and to our council member and staff. I had assumed we had a quorum. I knew of 2 absences, one of them about an hour ago. So I'm sorry about that, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. I've texted everybody. So agencies, I'm going to ask first Karen, and then I'm going to ask Dakota County Al. Is there urgency? Can you wait a month to come back, or do you want to, Lisa, do you have the words for that? We would not pass a recommendation from this committee, but.
It would be by consent.
Okay.
So my question back to you would be, what is the timing of the community development date and then council approval if it goes to September?
Do we have a September meeting?
We do?
We have a September 1st.
Well, there was a question about quorum for that too.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we supposedly have it, and,
Evan, I might not be in September meeting, by the way.
Did you already say that to Sandy or
No,
not?
I didn't, I say, but, sorry,
Okay,
oh,
family emergency, I'm actually.
I have a list of everyone who's,
I know.
well,
this might get interesting.
this is gonna go,
That's
okay.
why I
Okay,
wanted to
so-
find out.
That kind of makes it riskier to punt things over.
Oh, then I think we could do that.
And if we had quorum at the September 1st on us, then it would be CDC and then as commissioners and council systems.
Okay. That's the quick route, and that would work
That
for
would
you?
work, yep.
What?
I'm out of town.
Oh, yeah, Tracy's out of town, so we'll have to put something together.
But, I mean, so that gets us to quorum by the hair of our teeth in September.
Yeah, right now for September, I've got,
It might be better to just go with a consensus recommendation thing at this point then, because I don't know that I can count on that.
let's go. Tracy, you ready?
Yeah, let's just proceed.
Again, I'm sorry, and I will be.
So basically, the way this works is we can put some stuff into minutes and communicate to our liaison if there's major concerns, and they'll just go off of that rather than a recorded action.
So we're technically not meeting as a commission, just a group of interested citizens, because we're not empowered without quorum.
In terms of voting on stuff, yes. In terms of open meeting law stuff, probably no.
Okay.
That gets complicated, I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, where we sit in terms of.
Yeah, we can't actually act on anything.
Got it.
We'll punt our minutes over for sure.
They will leave in our opinion.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm happy to ask questions.
Exactly. So with that, we'll go to discussing a business item without taking action. Our first up is the Mississippi West Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion for Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Acquisition Master Plan Amendment. That was really worded. For Anoka County, we have Tracey presenting, and don't feel offended if we wander by the food as you talk.
Excellent. Good afternoon. Chair Commissioners, Councilmember, my name is Tracey Kinney. I'm a Senior Planner in Parks and Community Development. And today I will be presenting to you the Mississippi West Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion, as well as the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Acquisition Master Plan Amendment. And I'm presenting on behalf of Anoka County. And Karen Bleska from Anoka County is here to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So this land exchange entails removing land from Mississippi West Regional Park and adding land to the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve. The land will be used for a Highway 10 and BNSF railroad overpass for the Ramsey Boulevard and Riverdale Drive interchange. The overpass will create safer access to the park for walkers and bikers. The Mississippi West Regional Park is located south of Highway 10 along the Mississippi River in the city of Ramsey. This park is home to two other recent Regional Park and Trail Highway 10 safety improvements. You may recall the 2017 facility exchange that removed 5 acres from the park to improve the Riverdale Drive in exchange for $200,000 in park improvements. Additionally, the Central Anoka Regional Trail, which serves the park, was realigned in 2019 from Ramsey Boulevard to the center of the city of Ramsey, where a pedestrian bridge was added for safe crossing over Highway 10. So lots of work here for Highway 10. So Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve is roughly a 4,100 acre reserve that consists of significant native wildlife habitat and water resources. Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve also had a recent land exchange. In 2012, 1.3 acres of land was added to the park that includes indigenous burial grounds. in exchange for 3 in-holding parcels that were redesignated as Columbus Park Conservation Area. This land was funded with outdoor heritage funds, so it had to allow hunting, which is not allowed in the regional park system. Anoka County redesignated the land to both conserve the land and allow for hunting. So these images before you are images 1 and 2 of your business item. So for this request today, Anoka County Parks Department is requesting to permanently remove 3.6 acres of parkland in Mississippi West Regional Park for transfer to Anoka County Highway Department, as well as a 1.97 temporary construction easement. In exchange, the Anoka County Highway Department will transfer 33 acres of land to Anoka County Parks for addition to the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve. The replacement land was originally acquired by the Highway Department for a I-35W interchange that was not ultimately constructed. So this transfer of land to the Parks Department will allow a higher level of management and protection and an additional 350 feet of Rice Creek shoreline. Anoka County's equally valuable exchange proposal includes adding more acreage to the regional park system that has better natural resources and similar, if not better, recreational quality. The removal land is valued at $56,000. It consists of turf grass and restored native grasses and limited recreation. The replacement land is valued at $60,000. It includes 350 feet of Rice Creek and includes limited non-motorized watercraft access. So this table is table 1 in your business item. So here is the land removal area. The proposed land exchange will allow for the regional park to function as originally planned and continue to meet council standards for regional parks. The Mississippi West Regional Park's acreage will be reduced from 271 acres to 268 acres. The removal land consists of restored native grassland with maintained turf. You can see that on the right. The land was previously farmed. When the county took over ownership, the fields were restored to native grasslands. While the restored grasslands will be reduced by about 3 acres due to the road project, the loss will not affect its overall functionality as habitat or as a natural resource. There are no large environmental or natural resources of interest that will be affected by this project. And additionally, the stormwater generated from the road project will remain within the right-of-way and outside the park boundary, protecting the water quality of the Mississippi River. These images are 3 and 5 of your business item. And finally, the land replacement. So the land replacement adds quality natural resources from the Rice Creek ecosystem to the park boundary. The property consists of 10 acres of upland, 21 acres of wetlands, 2 acres of open water, and the 350 feet of Rice Creek. The property has limited on-water access and no accessibility by land. And this is figure 7 in your business item. There are no costs associated with this acquisition since it's part of that equally valuable exchange between the county departments. And this acquisition will close the gap in the boundary, add that 33 acres to the existing 4,133 acres, making the park reserve 4,166 acres, which in total exceeds the 1,000 acre minimum for that is identified for park reserves in the policy plan. So staff finds that the Mississippi West Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion, as well as the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Acquisition Master Plan Amendment is consistent with the following requirements, including the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, Chapter 6 System Protection Strategy 2, Chapter 4 Siting and Acquisition Strategy 1, and Chapter 5 Planning and Strategy 1, and other council policies, which is Thrive 2040. And with that, the proposed action before you, or to consider in the future, is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Mississippi West Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion. 2, to approve the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve Acquisition Master Plan Amendment. 3, approve the removal of 3.6 acres of land within the Mississippi West Regional Park in exchange for adding 33 acres of land to Rays Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve, which are figures 3 and 4 of the business item. And then 4, consent to the temporary construction easement for 1.97 acres of land within the Mississippi West Regional Park as illustrated in figure 3. With that, I'll stand for any questions, and Karen Plask is here as well.
All right, thank you. Questions or motions, commissioners? Or, I guess not really motions, just thoughts and whatever.
Loose recommendations.
Ideas.
Yes,
Yeah, I have an
go ahead,
idea.
Jeremy.
Mine is probably gonna be for Karen, but I'll offer it to you, Tracey, just in case. So recognizing that now with this 33 acres, there would be essentially contiguous non-water connection between the two sides of 35W. Is there an opportunity to do a wildlife or pedestrian underpass to link below 35W essentially and provide some wildlife diversion from an area that sees a lot of deer strikes and other conflicts?
Chair, Commissioner, that's an excellent question.
Probably actually a question for MnDOT.
Yeah, it's probably a MnDOT question, but you know, there's opportunity.
I'm Karen Blask, Park Planner for Anoka County Parks. Yes, there is an opportunity. We actually did discuss something like that during this master plan, but we figured we would just keep the development piece separate from this acquisition master plan. But it's something we can look at, and obviously we would have to work with MnDOT on
Right.
that.
That's great.
You wanna go?
I'm sorry, I have some concerns about this one. In Highway 10 and 169, I can see through the pretty orange line that it's gonna be a runabout, right? Is that the safe pedestrian cross that we're talking about, or is gonna be another cross?
Chair, Commissioner, Councilmember, that's a great question. So the pedestrian crossing path is 10 foot on either side of that double roundabout. So it's integrated with that.
But it is through the runabout.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, because in my experience, walking through a runabout, getting out of a highway is not really close or safe, especially if you're biking with your family or walking with a stroller. That's a concern for me. And I know we can't really do anything about it. I went back, I live around the area, I know the construction. I know a lot of people are not very happy about it. And but if it's too late to remove all this and say, no, stop it, no, I don't want runabouts here, figure out something else. It's just, that's something that it just kind of, I don't know. And then the other one is, it's gonna go really close to the park, and we don't have a tree barrier over there, so all the noise and the garbage and everything is gonna just fly into the, our park. So how far is the distance between where the exit of the highway is gonna be through the river, that is on the other side? Like if you see it in the picture.
Yeah, and if I can answer that.
From here to here.
When we start doing more of the development of that park, we actually had plans to create some sort of vegetative screening.
Okay.
And perhaps berming along that to kind of lessen that noise.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. Just a little, as I used to study architecture, and I know it's a complicated reason moving cities and parks, but I will not feel really happy. I mean, and then I saw the video, the render video of the future, and it's not just that runabout. It's like there's lots of them. So it's like we're moving to Greenway, Wisconsin. So. But thank you.
Cecily, you had something?
Yeah, I had a question, and maybe it's slide 4. I'm supportive of this project, even though I can't vote today. I think it's a great idea to add the acreage to the Rice Creek Chain of Lakes Park Reserve. Now, where is Rice Creek? Does it connect George Watch and Peltier?
Yes.
Okay. Is that navigable?
Kind of.
South of 35W, yes.
Okay. Because I've only been on
Hopefully in the
Centerville,
future.
I haven't been on the other lakes in the chain. So I heard something about hunting, where is that? On which lake?
That is north. Do we have
Tell me what was the name of the
Yeah.
lake?
Columbus Lake?
Columbus Lake, so yeah, I made staff go down in the Wayback Machine for this one. Because while I, for some reason, can't remember last week, I can remember a business item from 2013. But far north of 35, there's a little strip of parkland that goes up.
Is it
So
on this map?
it's on one of our things here.
Because I don't see something called Columbus Lake.
Hold on.
I see Centerville, it's pretty small.
Oh, maybe it's not actually in the printout. But if you look on our figure 4, I can describe it from that. So you see, there's all these lakes and a bit of green, the part we're talking about, and there's this green that's just kind of vertical. This continues up to about here, quite a ways due north in just a thin strip like that.
Okay.
And in that area, there's a much smaller lake right here called Columbus Lake. And there was a landowner willing to sell some stuff, but the things available for that were out of the Outdoor Heritage Fund, so we did a little bit of a swap. It's the January 2013 MPOS meeting, if you want to pull that up out of our records.
Is it like this one here?
Yeah.
Like this says Columbus here and I have a lake with a little greenish lines, I'm guessing.
That is too far north.
It's a little bit too, but you can actually see it on that map though. So she's looking at this one here. You can see the kind of middle green color is the regional park.
Not at this scale. I
No.
Well, yeah.
I don't have that.
Here, I'll come over and show you.
Maybe I did.
Figure 2.
I was looking at the.
Yeah, so
And is it like
this is regional
what kind of
parkland
hunting? Is
here.
it bow hunting
And
or?
this sort of very lightly shaded green.
Because that's the
is the
thing comes in
conservation area
Brooklyn
that we're
Park, we
talking
have, permits
So
for
there's
hunting
a
and
couple of
everybody
parcels
freak
that
out
we
and say,
swapped
what
from
is
one
it,
kind of
bow
green to the other
hunting?
kind of green.
They're like, oh, it's
Well,
not.
good.
No,
So the
and
chain
it's
of
very
lakes
hard
will
to
be
get a
shut
permit
down.
for bow hunting.
Right.
And we do some bow hunting within the regional parks to manage the deer population.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think it's very smart.
Does that answer what you were getting at, Cecily?
Yeah.
Okay. I will say, I do appreciate how you did the land conversion on this. This is based on our prior feedback where we prefer land for land whenever possible. They had some other ideas and went out and looked in a different park because there weren't any in-holdings in the Mississippi West. So I like that. That I think works out well for us.
I do too, but it's a shame, we have so few freeway exits off 35W heading north. And there's miles and miles and miles between them.
Sure.
I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been in Columbus a few times. Okay.
Okay. So it sounds like our consensus is basically we're mostly comfortable with the general things. Monica would prefer that the pedestrian access on the actual highway project was a little different.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand.
I will
There's
actually
pedestrian
take that back
access
to my
west.
highway department too, because
I,
we voiced that concern many a time.
I'm sure, yes.
That's fair.
Isn't the bridge on the west side though? The one that crosses right there, 10 and 169, pedestrian bridge there?
Yeah, but it's,
That's a little ways, but it's still
Yes,
kinda
there is
connected.
a thing,
Another thing.
but people
where are
aren't
you
gonna go that
gonna
far.
walk through,
No.
down or up
I'm
the
not saying that you
highway?
would,
Yeah.
there is other
There
access.
is a pedestrian bridge, yes. Where did it come from?
We have double side runabouts in Mexico City that are like 4 lanes wide, so I know how crazy those things. So when you tell me about, yeah, they're gonna know how to figure out this, and I have seen people here, turning left on the runabout, and it's like,
And
We're
they don't
learning.
know how to yield in roundabouts in Minnesota either.
yes, so it's
It's a little
always
frightening.
scary when they start seeing them around. It's like, no, please don't. There has to be something else here. But yeah, so sorry, it's just personal problem with us.
Okay,
Yep. Thank you.
sounds good. I think that's about all we do on that then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know what these things are called, but they're tasty.
They're
so I should-
sambusas, yeah. Get sambusas, people.
It's basically ground beef and onions in a shell. It's sort of
Yeah.
like a
It's-
fried taco thing.
It tastes a lot like a beef empanada.
I was gonna say, it looks like an
Yeah,
empanada.
yeah, the onions aren't quite as
That's good.
cooked as you find in empanada, but.
So our next thing, same
So it's
deal,
kind of
wouldn't business item,
the
but
run
without a vote on it. We have a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant for North Creek Greenway Regional Trail in Dakota County. And Jessica looks different today.
You changed your hair.
Hi, Emmett. Go ahead, I guess.
Good afternoon, commissioners and council member. I am not Jessica Lee, I'm Emmett Mullen, the Parks Manager here. I'm very grateful that Al Singer is here from Dakota County, so thank you, Al. Jessica passes on her appreciation for this continuing forward. She provided me with some good information, so let's go. In front of us today is an acquisition opportunity fund request from Dakota County for the North Creek Greenway Regional Trail. Next slide, please.
You've got the remote.
Oh, shoot. Thank you, Emmett. The North Creek Greenway Regional Trail is located in the west central part of Dakota County, and it's named after North Creek, which is a tributary of the Vermilion River. The 14-mile trail starts in the north at Lebanon Hills Regional Park. It connects to the zoo. It travels south through Egan, Apple Valley, Lakeville, Farmington, and Empire Township, and it ends at the Vermilion River near Whitetail Woods Regional Park. I think there will ultimately be, there's a planned regional trail down there that it's gonna intersect with. Next slide, Emmett. Just kidding. Okay, so here are two maps. The one on the left shows the North Creek Regional Trail. The existing segment that is open is in dark green to the north. The planned trail, so probably 75% of the trail is in a planned status, and that's in light green. And the Magellan property is in orange. The map on the right shows a close-up of the segment where the Magellan property is located, and it is circled in red. The subject property is 2.2 acres of undeveloped land that will be maintained as trail corridor. This is actually a picture that Jessica and Chi took when they visited the site, and they were impressed with not just the scenic value of this, but the natural resource quality of the corridor. It's a long, skinny corridor. The property appraised at $633,200, and after negotiations, the landowner agreed to a slightly higher cost of $681,700 and some change. Just to remind commissioners, we're able to pay up to 110% of the appraised value with the Parks and Trails legacy, and this is 107.7%. It's within that limit. After this acquisition, so this is, Tony, your question about fund balances. There will be about $7 million remaining in the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund program. So this is a message to our agencies, is that there's a lot of money in our acquisition funds that does have a time sensitivity to it. An additional $3.7 million will be brought in FY23 legacy funds later this month in August. So that brings us to over $10 million in acquisition funding. So we gotta crank up. But I know there's some big things happening out there without going into any detail, so probably more than you needed. Okay, this request is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan. It meets the requirements of the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund. It's consistent with the North Creek Greenway Regional Trail Plan. And Dakota County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Legacy Program. And with that, the recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $532,720 to Dakota County to acquire the 2.23 acre Magellan property located in Apple Valley for the North Creek Greenway Regional Trail, and authorize our Executive Director of Community Development, Lisa, sitting behind me, to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. So with that, I'm happy to try and answer any questions. Al is here to help. Thank you.
Cecily, go ahead.
Wow, this is pricey, but I understand it's within the range that is acceptable. So I also know that it's a very interesting shape of, and it seems that many of these regional trails are extremely linear. And, there's a few choices in the upper part to do anything other than linear, but down here, why would you want a parcel in that shape is my first question. Is it because it's available and there'll be a staging area or other facilities there?
You're talking about the widening on the south end?
Yeah.
Al, you want to introduce yourself
Sure.
and help out here? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Al Singer, I'm the Land Conservation Manager for Dakota County, and there are two reasons for the expense and for the shape. The expense is due to this land is zoned industrial. It is a petroleum tank farm, and so this is the priciest real estate in Apple Valley when you have industrial land, and so that's why the value is so high. And then petroleum companies are very difficult to negotiate with as well, and so we were pleased to actually get an agreement. The reason for the shape is we plan to construct a tunnel underneath County Road 42, which is a 4-lane road. And so we need that additional space to be able to grade, so we can minimize the amount of retaining walls that are necessary for the below grade crossing of County Road 42.
Great, and just have a couple other questions. So, hopefully there won't be remediation in the future by leaking tanks and whatnot.
That's already occurred on the site, and they've already cleaned that up.
For the first time. So, as an out-of-distance hiker, I hope the trail segment here isn't only paved, because a lot of us hikers don't like walking on paved trails when there can be a choice of shoulders that are DG or just natural soil.
This is always really a balancing act of trying to, when you're talking about land that's $180,000 an acre, getting an extra width to be able to accommodate those soft surfaces gets to be really pricey. And so that's the balancing act of trying to figure out what is the appropriate width in these industrialized portions of the region. And so our goal is to be able to provide a variety of experiences up and down the trail. There will be plenty of places along North Creek where you can get off the pavement.
Anyone else? Yes, Jeremy.
Thinking about that widening, I'm having difficulty imagining with perspective how big that actually is, but is there an opportunity for additional amenities on top of the grading that would go along with that underpass?
We have enough space for benches and things like that. We're also in the negotiating stage with Menards, which is just right next to them, for some additional width to widen the corridor. And so there would be space for putting amenities there as well.
Okay, cool.
Okay. I know part of the answer to this already, but could I see there's some disparities between numbers between our business item and purchase agreement and county action. Could you just explain briefly to the commission why that is?
One of the conditions of the sale for Magellan, because of liability, is they wanted the county, they required a 8-foot high chain link fence as a condition of the sale. And so we agreed that there is a public safety interest to provide that fence. And at the same time, Magellan wanted to be in control of the fence. They wanted it on their property. They wanted to be able to control all aspects of it. And so the county is willing to provide the $80,000. So that's not part of the request that comes.
And much smaller numbers, there's also a difference between our request letter and our action where the purchase price is higher by $782. Not a significant amount, but why is that different?
You know, I would have to go back. One of the things that we also had to get from the city of Apple Valley is the parcel needed to be subdivided. And so we had some costs associated with, sorry.
That makes sense for like plating.
Sure.
Survey.
Which, and we do have some separate line items for the legal costs. It's actually on the purchase price line, but maybe something got wrapped in for that.
Yeah, there were some other additional costs associated with fees required by the city of Apple Valley to subdivide the parcel. And I can go work with Jessica or Emmett to reconcile that to make sure that we're all on board.
Sure.
My guess is that Jessica's been through this very carefully and because she always raises these questions.
Yeah, I just
Al and Jessica have been talking about this one for a while.
yeah, I just say my request then to Emmett would be for, we probably want to have a note about, especially the fence thing, when it goes to CDC. And in the future, whenever we have differences in numbers from one page to the next, it would be good to have a note about why in our business items. Because that makes total sense, of course, but it's like, you just pull it up and go, why is this? So,
Yep.
that'd be good. The nice part is it means that our business item number is lower.
Yeah.
So that's always the best way for it to go. Yes, Sue?
Mr. Chair, Al, if I've already embarrassed you like this before, I apologize. But since I joined the council, I've just been awestruck by Dakota County and the work that you folks do. It's true of all of our counties, but my first introduction to Anoka County's park system was as a member of the FMR board. The only grievance I have with Anoka County is that they stole away one of our staffers, but forgive me for that someday. But I just, to all of the counties, to the whole park system, we are so blessed in this region. And I know that the people of Dakota County make a special financial commitment to the parks, and I just, kudos. Not enough can be said about that, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I might note that last meeting you approved the acquisition of the Adelman property. We're closing on that tomorrow. And so there's progress.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
All right, so it sounds like general consensus on this is it looks fine. Nothing particularly.
In closing, I want to encourage people to eat because there's a lot of food over there. No pressure.
Don't make me go back for seconds before you've taken some. Come on, I'll do it, but. All right, so that will move us on then to what's actually our second information item, which is about the 2021 visitor study, research findings, introduction and proposed sharing approach. I'm going to point out that this is the first of 3 presentations, so we do not have to accomplish all things today. So go ahead and let us know kind of what our goals of today are versus what we should hold off on so we know how to not talk for hours and hours on end.
Jessica's watching online and she had the answer that we'll put in the report.
Oh, nice.
Of course she did.
Well done.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jessica.
Sorry to get her on the tiny things. Go ahead, Darcy.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, Council Member. It's a delight to be back here again with you this evening. As Chair Yaruso did point out, this is one of 3 conversations. There are so many findings that are, I think, worthy of hearing your response to from the visitor study that we really decided to kind of take it slow and unpack it piece by piece. There will be just one CDC information item on September 19th, so we're kind of doing the long play version here with you. So to answer your question, Chair, I think I would like to do an overview this evening of the study, the purpose, share the piece about the multipliers, and then walk through, I'll walk through all 3 handouts very briefly, and we can discuss, I'll sort of track what we discussed tonight and carry over to next month when we will also bring in additional data, which I'll share with you what else we'll be talking about. So just because I don't want to say you can only, it's hard once you've seen everything to unsee the 3rd handout and we'll just talk about the first 2.
Sure.
So, so the visitor study, I'm Darcy Vandergrift, I'm a principal researcher here at the council, and the visitor study happens every 5-ish years, except for, there's pandemics and things like that prevent it. So we were gonna do this in 2020. We started working on the study in 2019. It was a collaborative effort, which I will bring up repeatedly along the way, that there were members of all 10 implementing agencies forming part of a local technical advisory committee to create the survey that we administered. We based it on the University of Minnesota's original visitor study survey, but the implementing agencies had some great ideas about how to make it shorter. I think that this is, even though there's so much data, it was successful because it didn't take people so long to go through. But we worked to design the survey, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it is important to know it's collaborative. So what are we doing this for? It helps inform planning, policy, and management. Everything from providing data to implementing agencies for them to talk about with their staff, to getting policy guidance for that policy plan update. We're listening to the insights that you provide to kind of help us with the work that we do. It's important to look, and you'll see by looking at the findings, it's important to look at, evaluate and strengthen equitable usage of our parks and trails system in accordance with the 2040 policy plan. Here's the part we're going to talk about tonight. The statutory requirement is that we update our funding formulas, which are part of the use estimate. You heard about that last week, where we estimate how many folks come to the parks and trails every year. And so this is one of 2 ongoing research responsibilities. The visitor study is about every 5 years. The annual use estimate is every year. So this year's use estimate that you saw last month used the funding formulas that were determined based on this survey that we did. And I think one interesting point, and this has really come out with talking to the implementing agencies, is the survey really asks people about their experience on one day that they visit in the summer. So we don't know about winter activities or people's experiences in the parks in the winter at all. And we also, but I think a strength of it is we're saying, you have just visited the park, what is your impression? And so we're not getting it based on sort of my abstraction or somebody's abstraction about their overall impression. It's really, you've been here today, here, please answer the questions about today, and there's strength in those findings. So, as I said, the survey was adapted by the local technical advisory committee for the 10 implementing agencies. We, 2 of my implementing agency colleagues worked with me to select the consultant, and the consultant administered the surveys in the field. This is really important because you can do the prettiest visualizations in the world and present statistics, but if your field research, the data collection is not rigorous, you are not really telling an accurate ground truth of a story. And Wilder Research did a really rigorous hiring bilingual surveyors, really doing a lot of methodological training, a lot of support for staff, consulting closely with us and the implementing agency. So I just want to take a moment to say that I'm very confident in the results because of the rigor with which they generated the data. So we had over 5,400 surveys, a 50% response rate. I don't know if you've ever done a survey in some kind of work you do, but a 50% response rate is nice. And again, I credit Wilder for this. And the surveys were administered in, we weighted the data. So in other words, once we set up quotas proportionate to the visitation, both park and trail visitation and the implementing agency visitation. So, chain of lakes surveys should count more or represent a greater proportion of total surveys than, say, I don't want to diminish any, a trail with lower visitation, so we did that. And also we chose, and the technical advisory committee did this, chose one park or trail from each implementing agency that was oversampled. So we would have representative data, 196 surveys at that park or trail. And so Wilder Research generated the data, administered the surveys, and turned the data, created the data set to turn over to us, and then we are reviewing it and analyzing it here in-house by council staff, myself and some data scientists. Yes, Commissioner?
I'm curious about the selection of Wilder Research. I know they're big firms that do a lot of great work. Were there any MCUB goals associated with that selection of a contractor, and how did equity in purchasing apply to this work?
We did not explicitly send it out to MCUB first. I do not believe that requirement was in place at the time that we did, because we did this in 2019. But also, and we did not have any designated MCUB. In fact, most of the people that applied were firms from out of town.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what that acronym is, by the way?
MCUB, Metropolitan Council Underutilized Business Program. Yeah.
And when it comes to survey research firms, I'm not familiar with one that can do sort of a survey of this size. Wilder, however, you're familiar with them maybe in case other commissioners might not be. They do have a pretty solid background in working with vulnerable populations. They do a survey of homelessness, and the lengths that they went to diversify their staff were
And their
impressive.
board.
And their board, okay, thank you, I wasn't sure of that, but I appreciate that question, and
Yeah.
certainly for the next survey, that's something to prioritize our efforts. I'm gonna just talk about that. So, just briefly covering the visitor study process and the timeline. So, this project was incredibly complex, involving the 10 implementing agencies and the consultants and council staff. So we actually, before summer and fall of 2021, we created the survey. We actually contracted with Wilder in spring of 2020, and then the pandemic hit right after that, so we delayed it, but we worked with them for an entire year to make sure the implementing agencies had chosen where you administer the surveys in a way that was accurate, so we would get a representative of all the visitation. So then we did data collection and preparation in summer, fall of 2021. And then we were given the data set, and we did the multipliers first. And the multipliers are those vehicle and seasonal multipliers, and then working through those funding formula conversions, talking to all the implementing agencies, and also with finance. That was several month process. And then in the summer, this summer, we're having what we're calling our summertime fun time data discussion workshops, and they are indeed fun. They're almost every Thursday over lunch hour, and we're just getting together and we're talking about these handouts that we're going to talk about here. And then our plan is to incorporate the feedback from implementing agencies, from you, into the final report and publish the findings, but also the insights from the workshop in fall of 2022. And I think that there will be additional efforts after that to work with implementing agency colleagues who would like additional data products from the data. So one thing I want to cover this evening is the more informing is about the new multipliers for spring. And the effects of that. So as you know from last month, when we do the summer use estimate, we count cars, and we have to say how many visits does each car represent. And so we found in the summer that there are fewer people per vehicle. That's been a trend over time, but the pandemic really made a huge impact in people social distancing, not riding in cars. And I will just alert you that next summer, we will probably see a reduction in visitation. Or this summer, when we do the use estimate, we will probably see a reduction in visitation because of the reduction in vehicles. The seasonal multipliers were similar to 2016, so we asked people how much they visited in fall and spring and also in winter. Those were very much the same. There was some differences among implementing agencies in terms of non-local visitation that affects our bonding formulas. But on average, they were up. And so that's going to be a change in the bonding formula. And so that was all the inputs to our funding formulas that were done. And I'd be happy to answer questions about that as we move forward. So now I'd like to move into talking about the part that we will discuss. And I would invite you to refer to the first workshop handout. So background and visitor satisfaction. So we went over the study just like I did with you here, and then we looked at the visitor satisfaction data, and we found that, and I'm gonna, 88% of visitors said on that day facilities were very good or excellent. There was a pattern of older facilities, older systems had slightly lower rates of visitor satisfaction, so Minneapolis and City of St. Paul, other Dakota, Washington counties, 3 River Park District had higher levels of reported satisfaction. Then we also asked what would be one thing that would improve your visit today. And this is one thing I was really pleased with what Wilder did because they took open-ended comments, so we didn't presume any categories ahead of time, and then Wilder coded them. And so we were able to then have that statistical, quantitative data base, but coded from people's actual responses. So the top park suggestion was nothing needs to be changed, everything's good. The top one for trails is better trail maintenance. And also people prioritize bathrooms, flush toilets instead of porta potties, the conditions of bathrooms, water, availability of water, not enough water along trails, that talked about signage, and also asking for shade. And so in our first workshop, implementing agencies had some really insightful comments about these, that it's hard to fund the less exciting maintenance, but that this is clearly important. And they told stories of how they have done focus groups with non-visitors, people who are not visitors of the system, and that those basic amenities are really important to having people want to come and visit. And then, let me make sure I'm not missing. Oh, and another thing is that shade is both trees, and people said trees, but also shade in terms of just sheltering yourself from shade, so built infrastructure around shade. And then people asked in this workshop for more data disaggregation. And this is I have a lot to say about that. I will do it as much as possible, but I also think we can sometimes end up that there are patterns that are universal or that we also need to pay attention to, and we need to disaggregate. We have to think about it complexly. So, okay, so that was the first workshop. And then finally, you have this table in your handout. Visitors suggested, this is a list of the top 5 mentioned items. And you can see that often it was nothing or everything was good. We did have I thought a thoughtful request for disaggregation by parks versus trails, which I will be working on. But it is interesting to see the patterns of the changes that people would like to see.
Do you think it's because, you're asking me something and I'm coming really happy from the park? Oh no, everything is good, and that's, not that it's bad, but it's like you're just enjoying the park, so why something's gonna change?
Commissioner, I think you do have a good point. We did ask about the question, and this was designed by the University of Minnesota, what are the facilities like? And so if everybody said everything's good, I think, if I were an implementing agency, I wouldn't say, oh, everything's good, my work's done, but instead kind of dive into some of those comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to build on that, better trail maintenance might be something different to somebody who works in parks versus someone who has visited a park maybe very few times.
Of course.
Having a few leaves on the trail might, to a infrequent visitor, mean it's not well maintained.
Yeah. May I ask a follow-up question, Commissioner?
So I'd be curious how that's defined. Is it cracks in the pavement? Is it?
Sure. Commissioner, that's a great comment of different ways of defining it. and how perception, how important are perceptions to our work in addition to safety, Thank you for that comment. Yes?
My question's about the nothing all good response. Was that aggregating people that said, oh, everything was great, along with people who said, didn't even notice facilities, sorry, no answer? Or was there an option for not applicable?
So, yeah, Commissioner, thank you for that. So there were actually 3 types of responses. There was everything's good, there's no suggestions, and then there's like no answer, or I don't want to respond. So I didn't count those. I did aggregate the nothing and all good because I thought they were close enough of not having a complaint.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
I was also wondering from what Monica was saying, is there any way of correcting for the like cultural bias of people tending to say, oh, it's all fine? Like we all know, people say, hey, how are you? We just say fine and move on.
Are you pointing at Scandinavia?
Yes. Are we doing the same thing on park surveys? And is there any way to know whether like different user groups are more or less inclined to be more or less critical?
So, Chair Russo, I think that is a great point. I am going to do some disaggregation by different demographic characteristics. Some of it that I have done does not show a pattern. And the other thing I am going to do for the implementing agencies is literally take out all of the comments and sort them by their park or trail, so they can just see. So it's not quantified, it's not X%, it's just like here's the entire list, and you see interesting thing. Okay, Emma, you may have to rein me in. You can see some really interesting things like comments from Asian American visitors about the choices or about the fish that are available for fishing, or the lack, a concentration of comments around fishing. Now, not enough that I can say with statistical significance, this is but it's interesting to disaggregate the qualitative comments sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting a little too excited. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the second handout, please, of visitor activities. And I do want to express my appreciation to my intern colleague who's here, Spring Nguyen, who made these beautiful handouts. She's given plots and she turned it into things of beauty. So the visitor activities, so this top activities for parks were hiking and walking, relaxing, doing nothing, and observing nature. And these were, people were asked, what are all the things that you did in the park this day? So these are the most popular based on, counting up all of the responses. And on trails, it was biking, hiking, walking, and dog walk, dog park, and running. It's important to note that there was, not surprisingly, a wide range of activities for parks, a smaller range of activities for trails. So the other thing that we did here is we dived into, and I'm going to show you a little this on the handout, activity patterns. And we have to hold kind of 2 things simultaneously in our head, that there are the most popular activities, and then there are also, we analyzed activities that some social characteristics were more likely to do than others. So for example, young adults 18 to 24 are 11 times more likely to hammock than adults 45 to 64, which was the biggest group. We're going to talk more about age next month. This does not mean that hammocking was the #1 activity, but it's interesting to see those patterns, and we'll talk about that. And so we had a really robust conversation about both popular activities and activity patterns, and the implementing agencies had some thoughtful policy comments. So one was the real importance of flexible open spaces to building equitable park systems, and we'll see that in a lot of activities that can be done in these flexible open spaces are more frequently done by groups that are less served by the park system. Hiking and walking as the most popular activity, could we support a range of activities? So if somebody comes to go for a walk, is there ways to invite them into hiking or invite them into learning about the diversity of hiking and walking activities? Like you've never thought about hiking I had never thought about kind of how do you disaggregate hiking and walking and inviting people into activity. We got feedback that the research is valuable and it helps guide thinking, and also a request to learn more about age 62 plus, and I can say more about that next month when we talk about it more. So here you have on the handout the most popular activities. The darkest blue, greater than 40% of the visitors did it. 20 to 30% of the visitors did that second shade. The next lightest shade, 3 to 9%, and less than 3% of the visitors did all of the unshaded. So here's the one that may be, that I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at, and it's the activity patterns. Figures. And on the first page, we have activity disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So what you see here is for the featured group, you're comparing that group to all other respondents in the survey. And if there is a dot or on this and an event and a dot, you are seeing an activity that this group has more probability of doing when compared to other groups. So when you look at likelihood of greater possibility by Asian American visitors, you see that top one, family event, is 2.5. They're about 2.5 times more likely to report they're attending a family event than the population as a whole. There is something called a confidence interval, which has to do with sample size and how big the difference is between the featured group and the rest of the group. And so normally you would see like a horizontal line through the dot that would span sort of a confidence interval. So it might be as low as one, it might be as high as another. We're going to put that in the appendix, but just to make it simple, these are all statistically significant differences. So I won't go over every single one, but an interesting piece is that there were a lot of activities by Latina visitors that were more likely to do than the sample as a whole. That there are some that show up on a couple of the graphs, like fishing, like playing ball sports that require those open spaces, family events, using the playground. And then for white visitors, there were 3 activities that we were more likely to do: dog walking, dog park, biking, and hiking and walking. So let's quickly turn to the second page of activity patterns. Now here the comparison groups are a little different. So I have one about age, and the comparison group here is not everyone else in the survey, it's just folks 45 to 64, because that's the biggest group that was the biggest proportion. But you do see here, again, like Latina visitors on the last page, younger people are more likely to do this wide range of activities than the 45 to 64 age group. And then we also have the question about disability was, does someone in your group include someone with a disability? So we do not have the disability status of the person who themselves, and we asked about the range of disability or condition, so physical, cognitive, so the emotional. And so you see here that the answers, the answers were swimming, observing nature, relaxing, doing nothing. And then finally, I want to talk a little about figure 7. This is the likelihood of greater participation by non-binary and women visitors. So we asked people, and we'll talk about this in more at a later date, about gender identity. The confidence intervals are very large for the non-binary individuals, but I still think it's worth reporting that there are differences in activity patterns. Thank you. And then you also see here a pattern for women respondents around ranging from community event to relaxing, doing nothing, although not as big of a difference in likelihood differences for women as between women and men as between some of the other comparisons that we're doing. I flew through that because I really want to make sure we get to discussion. Here are so this, we're pivoting again from patterns of more likely to do something to just looking at the most popular activities overall, disaggregated by social groups. Walking and hiking is the most popular among everyone. And there are some differences for other social groups, but categories, but there's also some similarities. And I will say, so overall, to summarize, some themes from the workshop is some policy pieces that came up is what are discussion of flexible open spaces and our policy plan update. Can we create a Friends of the Regional Park funding source? Can we think more dynamically about trails, like about a linear park to attract more users? We're gonna dive into trail disparities a little bit more when we go forward. Activity patterns by youth and over 62, and then open and flexible spaces are important. And I think, Chair, to answer your question, we had not developed that third handout I got. That third handout was hot off the presses, the one on race, ethnicity, and age. I'm happy for us to dive into that tonight, but I will be presenting on that next month.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, so here are the discussion questions we use with the implementing agencies. I am eager to hear your responses and thoughts.
All right, Cecily.
Well, I am so glad to see that hiking and walking are #1 in parks and #2 in trails.
Nice.
Yes, because that's what I see a lot of, but I'm in the over 62 group, so maybe it's when I'm out there in the parks. So I had a couple questions. Now, how is hammocking different from doing nothing? Well, I mean, I live
No
next door to,
judgment.
no, I live next door to William O'Brien, and you see a lot of groups of kids hanging hammocks right by the river, vaping and doing whatever they're doing. But they seem to be not really doing anything other than,
Hammock.
Well, putting a hammock is kind of hard job, so that's already work done. I
Once
didn't
it's
know,
up,
I
you gotta
guess.
enjoy it.
Yeah, I know.
so maybe that answers the question.
So, Commissioner, I appreciate you taking that with a spirit of curiosity. To me, it's intriguing. If somebody did answer that they're doing both of those things, again, as thinking back to the youth and parks research, you know, that desire for space to be with people their own age and what that activity is. It's, you know, if respondents are saying that they're different activities, then it's interesting to think about why.
No, absolutely, and I guess I've always thought of activities in park and trails as being active or passive, you know, depending on the intensity. And I guess it falls under that very passive category. But I had a couple other questions in the visitor activities, the commuting. I would be curious whether they're commuting to work or traveling through to a non-work place. Maybe they're taking the trail to get to the mall. Maybe they're taking the trail to get to a friend's house. So is that really commuting? I always think of commuting as going to work. So I kind of split that one. But I guess it also depends on the age. You know, if it's a young person, they're probably not commuting. They're to work. They may be commuting to non-work. And I look forward to hearing what you think about his policy for the Friends of Regional Parks.
I'm the humble parks researcher commissioner, so I don't have, I'm sort of sharing something that somebody said, but
Yeah, because Parks and Trails Council has a whole big program on friends groups. And those may be more state parks or state trails rather than regional.
Yeah,
And I'm sure Ariel can work with you.
I can share, I think the context that came up is them talking about how difficult it is to maintain facilities, how its funding is available for a lot of different things, but how do we maintain them?
I will say on your point about the hammocking, one thing that's useful about getting information about activities, some things require different facilities, but some also just require different policies and rules. So we very rarely see this in Minnesota, but I know elsewhere in the country, there are a lot of park systems where hammocking isn't allowed because of concerns about damage to trees. So some places take the approach of, okay, here's our guidelines of what you need to use in terms of equipment to do it properly, and some just say, you know what, we don't want to deal with it. So one thing people are giving us feedback on by highlighting that as a separate activity is please let us do this and let us know if you need us to do anything special to be allowed to keep it.
Well, maybe it's new to urban parks because people have been hammocking in wilderness areas for decades. You know, just to be off the ground in hot weather.
Yeah.
And be away from rattlesnakes and such.
Yeah, I'm just speaking as someone who does hammock camping overnight myself.
Yeah.
I see on some of the forums online about this stuff. Elsewhere, over the last decade or so, there's been some shifts in other states where it's been getting harder and harder to find places where you can do it.
I think it's funny that the Latin community is way higher to be hammocking. I honestly think that speaks a lot about culture because it's part of our culture. So you not to sleep on a hammock at nighttime, but it's just to have it there and go and have. What I will actually, and not in this one because this is already done and it's a great. I'm not criticizing. I love it. It's great. But when they say I do nothing, I will. Well, what do you mean by nothing? Because then maybe you go into nothing. It's like I feel like it's when you ask your kid, "How's school?" Good. It's like, what mean by good? So just go into what is nothing. So maybe we will know. You know, what Esi was saying, is this hammocking nothing or nothing? To me, nothing is. Well, I would just go park and not even leave my car and start reading or something. I don't know. So yeah.
And Commissioner, I will. Please criticize. I really appreciate feedback always. But it was a question. What are your activity was relaxing / doing nothing, and in my mind that category pivots a little bit to an intentional sort of coming to relax and not necessarily try to achieve something, but because relaxing was with it. But I think you're asking a really great question.
Well, and I get it. I'm hyperactive person too. For me, doing nothing is, have to do something. Like, see, I'm playing with my hands all the time and I'm listening, but it's just, so that's a hard one to describe for me. But yes, if we can get both, you mean nothing, you just sit down and, because we also have like, nature watch. So that will mean we doing nothing. It's like I'm just watching around here. Yeah, but I do like the study and I think so. And I like how you put all the dots and mix activities. That's very enlightening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will say in response to this bullet of what else would I like to know, I'll continue beating my drum of, I'd like to see if we can pull it off sometime, a visitor study and count in the winter.
Absolutely.
To see a count.
Well, speaking of,
of course, the world of unlimited
Parks and
funding and
Trails
resources and whatever, but
I love that.
I'd be really interested to know, would the results of that match what we've been assuming it is? And what might we not have even thought of?
And Chair Russo, I will say, because after I made this, we had one more workshop in implementing agencies. Colleagues said something similar. It's like where we need data on winter.
Yeah.
One thing that surprised me is often I see people doing yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong or all of those sorts of things, and I'm surprised nobody mentioned it.
Yeah.
Because you see it in parks.
So I believe that should be something that was not a category offered. Somebody would have to fill it in, which is something that we could improve. There's a gender piece to that, I think, maybe. So, and it was also interesting, people offered as open-ended a lot of Bible study too. That was, and meditation, but explicitly coming to study Bible.
And I wonder, I know a lot of people do that as part of, like, I know in Washington County, they have scheduled programming of yoga and a couple other things that I.
Goat yoga.
Yeah, and I see there is an option on here for attended a program or class, so some people might have put it in with that.
Well, but there's also.
But I'll bet there's more than we're
impromptu.
aware of too.
Yeah.
is there a question where you openly ask them what would you like to see on the park after? Or what can we offer to you or?
Commissioner, there's a question about what changes would help you visit the park more often, and I will come to share those data. And I'm also going to disaggregate that by new visitors as a kind of proxy for non-visitors. It was a closed-ended question, but there were some open-ended responses too.
Okay.
I'm not spoiling the next one.
Excited to see the next one.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Darcy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very informative.
That brings us to our third and final information item about developing the regional vision and values for the next regional development guide. This again is something that we will be talking about many times over who knows how long.
Chair, just one more advertisement for the tea. Have you had the East African tea?
I have not. I'm gonna have to
There are
look it
two
up.
big things of it.
Is it black tea or what is it?
It's kind of a cinnamon black tea is my interpretation, which could be wrong.
But it doesn't have dairy or sugar or anything else in it?
I'm guessing there's a lot of sugar in it.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Jonathan's nodding his head.
Yeah. It's hot, it's spicy. It's excellent.
All right, go ahead and introduce yourself. and
Yeah,
go ahead.
good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners and Councilmember Vento. My name is Michael Larson. I am a planning analyst in the Community Development Division. I work in a work unit called Local Planning Assistance. First of all, before I continue, I just wanted to check in with you about time constraints on our presentation. I think you ordinarily end at 6?
We attempt to, it's
Okay.
not an actual cutoff, that's our goal. So
Right.
Should we go for another 20, 25?
You can go until you feel like you're losing us.
Could go until people finish eating the food.
Yeah. Nobody
That'll be
leaves until the
mandatory.
food is gone. Yeah, just do what
Well,
you
I will do my best. I certainly don't consider this to be the first and only opportunity to engage on the regional development guide, so we'll do our best to make use of the time. So again, I work in local planning assistance and I am managing the vision, values, and goal process for the 2050 regional development guide. This will be the guide that replaces Thrive MSP 2040 and it has a yet to be determined name. So I wanted to brief you on this process and hear kind of your initial thoughts about and ideas about how the regional parks and trail systems can inform the overall vision for the growth of the region through 2050. Okay, next slide, Mike. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through this. This slide is just meant to give you an overarching sense of the timeline and process. We're updating not only the 2050 Regional Development Guide, but as well as the 4 other policy plans, constituent plans that are part of the policy framework for the region, and that includes, of course, the Regional Parks Policy Plan. So we've kind of been in a process on the left of the diagram that includes reflection, analysis of emerging issues, work that grounds us, like this identification of values and vision and goals for the region, population and employment forecasts, and exploring what kind of scenarios we might face in the future with various forces and issues. So much of our policy development and drafting will occur next year. The adoption of the Regional Development Guide is anticipated in late 2024 or early 2025. You might be familiar with the term system statement. After a system statement is a summary document that we send to each of the region's communities. After the adoption of all of the policy plans, it's a summation of all of the regional policy. That will occur in fall of 2025. And the director will, if I'm getting into these timelines, she'll flag me. So after which communities will have 3 years to update their city comprehensive plans, which will then be due at the end of 2028. So we are considering a number of things in the development of values and vision. Again, kind of looking at all of the work that's been done recently or in the past to guide us for our current discussions that include the visions and plans expressed by communities in their local comprehensive plans. Research on important and emerging issues, such as those related to racial disparity, the strength of the regional economy, and climate-related issues. Themes that have emerged from council and advisory group discussions, including this one, prior ones, and future ones that we'll have with you. We've done some analysis of kind of what comes to the surface with some of these conversations. And some of the policy plans may need specific direction, and we'll reflect on what kind of foundation language will be helpful for that process. And of course, outreach and engagement, including with you and a variety of stakeholder groups. So a lot of subject matter expertise is formed is informing this process. I see there on the list, including in regional parks. I think one of the things that we want to emphasize in our conversation with you is to making connections not only about the importance of the regional park system by itself, but how it might relate to other issues in the region, including its economic competitiveness, and issues related to climate and that kind of thing, where there might be policy overlap or intersection. So we've been having meetings with the council and all of its advisory groups. So I wanted to share with you what we've heard to date and see if these resonate with you. Participants understand, various stakeholders understand that there are limited resources and that it's important for us to have focus and to establish priorities so that we can be effective in our work. We hear a lot of words related to compassion, respect, and empathy for others, as well as willingness to be open. We hear about the importance of leadership, but also in the context of collaboration and cooperation with others. We also hear about risk-taking and the importance of being passionate about the work that we do, being bold, being creative, and innovative. So, and also making sure that we have a transparent process. So we've kind of grouped some of those thoughts into what we consider to be organizational values that kind of transcend policy area, but it seemed to be important regardless of the policy topic. So then we get into more specific to our region and the people in businesses and families and communities. So not surprisingly, many want to address issues of equity, racism, and other forms of discrimination and inequities. Fairness, respect, and justice are words that we hear a lot about. Similarly, we hear a lot about the words related to the value of belonging, of being included, and participating in the life of the region. We hear a lot about climate and the environment, and in that sense, we hear words like stewardship, resilience, and sustainability. And we hear words related to the economy, including economic well-being, prosperity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And something that we've heard in transportation that might also resonate with parks, based on some of the detailed conversations that you were just having, is choice, comfort, and convenience. And some of those things that people really want to see improved in the regional parks, like bathrooms, shading, places to stop, that kind of thing. Some of those details I think matter to users, matter to people in the region. So we kind of are seeing again a set of themes here for discussion. Kind of what we think of might be kind of the basis for a regional vision discussion. Again, this is not a proposal, but there's sort of buckets that seem to, and we are really interested in encouraging people to react to the language and react to this categorization. Again, we have a lot of different filters that we'll consider, like how it relates to the policy language. Eliminating racial disparities or closing disparity gaps is a big theme. Being a welcoming region where people feel safe and valued is another theme. Seeing our region's increasing diversity as a strength and not as a problem or an opportunity, and also maybe as a source of economic potential. From a development standpoint, seeing development as a way to address needs, including housing, perhaps the restoration of the environment through redevelopment, and ensuring that as we grow and as we change, that the region's natural resources are preserved. And let's see, a few more here. So I was almost trigger happy here with my slide here. We hear about accessibility and navigability of the region, the interconnectedness of it, especially for those who don't have use of a personal automobile to get around, who are relying on other choices besides that. And then there's a lot of, there's a thread of conversation about the importance of strategic investments in a variety of things to ensure the vitality of the region's economy, the sustainability of the growth that we see, ameliorating inequities and driving down greenhouse gas emissions. So kind of making sure that the investments are work towards those events. So we kind of gave you a set of kind of more simplified statements that wanted you to react to tonight, since we don't have a quorum, I'd also pose a question to you, how to bring in the other members of MPOSC, kind of next steps, and make sure that they have an opportunity. We could do a survey, or we could come back next month, or there are different choices to kind of pull people in. We had to do that with LUAC as well. So of course, in my role in this process, I am becoming very sensitized to a lot of different policy realms, including parks. So it's very interesting for me to really hear the details, like what you've just seen, or the discussions that you were just having on recent agenda items. So it really helps sensitize me to the importance that people see and looking for connections among issues. So I would assert that I think preservation of restorations of natural systems is something that resonates with you with relation to the regional park, as well as creating an equitable, welcoming, and safe regional park system. Now, this effort that we're doing is for the regional development guide, which will set a foundation or some direction for the policy plan. So the regional parks policy, the next update to the regional parks policy plan, we'll be able to get into some more detail, and this doesn't not replace or supplant that effort, but we want to create language that helps frame that up and makes that clear how that fits in. So, Mr. Chair, I would just I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, so I would certainly like to hear what you and the other members, commissioners think about some of these ideas and concepts, and what comes to mind. I know this was kind of a high-level discussion to end the evening, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about what's to elaborate, or just let me know what's missing.
Okay. Jeremy, go ahead.
I'll start us off. I think, especially for economic growth, the regional park system is a key driver of livability and desirability of the metropolitan area. And so to the extent that we recognize that as a resource that brings population here, if the people are here, the jobs will be here. If the jobs are here, more people will come. And so recognizing that those amenities are critical and maintaining their accessibility, equitability, everything about the park system maintains a happy and growing population. So I think that is critical to recognize when we're doing this development guide.
Yes, Cecily.
I wanted to reflect on the regional vision current themes, the slide before. Two things really caught my attention. The affordable housing and workforce opportunities. Now, I live in Washington County, and one thing I hear from a lot of my neighbors and people I meet is the lack of housing for the 55 and up crowd. You know, senior housing, assisted living housing. And as our population ages, affordable is probably important too, but then the region being interconnected and navigable for those without personal vehicles. Well, where I live, we don't have Uber, we don't have cabs, we don't have buses. And I can give you a personal example. I was in the emergency room Saturday night, and if I didn't have a neighbor to call, I don't know how I would have gotten home. No cabs, no Uber, no buses. So, you know, let's not forget all of the region. You know, it's not just Hennepin and Ramsey. You know, there's more rural parts of the region. And then, you know, to regional parks for a moment, something I've said for a long time is we have a fabulous regional park system here with the 10 implementing agencies. We also have a lot of great state parks and national parks lands. And to me, it would be really interesting in one of these long-range planning documents to see the overlay. You know, there's what, 60-some thousand acres in regional parks, but what is it with, you know, the city and the state and the national parks? It's probably pretty impressive for a metro area.
Chicago did something similar with Chicago Wilderness.
in the Bay Area,
Yeah,
as too.
where they mapped sort of the emerald necklace of Chicago
Yeah.
and how all the different ownerships overlap. That's kind of interesting.
I actually see kind of the opposite end of things on the housing question from what Cecily does. I'm also in Washington County, but much further in, just barely outside of Ramsey County across the line. And one of the things that's complicated is when you talk about affordable housing goals, it just talks about like general size, price range, things like that. Well, what it turns out is that the most profitable way of building stuff that meets that definition is senior apartments. So we have had like 5 new apartment complexes go up in the last decade, and they're all senior apartments. So the people that are at, like, young families looking for affordable housing, you can't live where I live. And it's the same thing near where my parents live in Shoreview. They've had all kinds of affordable housing go up that's mostly senior apartments because it still meets the way we've defined it. So I think we need to find some way of adjusting our definitions so that, yes, there should be senior housing. Certainly that's an issue we've identified all over the place in our previous long-term plan, and I presume it's gonna be similar in this one, of an aging population. But we also need to address the affordable housing for the younger people that are there and figure out a way that both of those are served and not just have one bubble that's a pick one because it makes more money and leave the other out, because you could flip back and forth, but right now what we're mostly seeing is one's getting more than the other. From both a park perspective and just other things, we heard at the very beginning of our meeting, transportation's a huge issue for parks. So you're not just getting home from hospitals and things, but getting out to our parks. We talk in our visitor survey and our formulas about how one of our primary measures of what makes something a regional park or trail is the non-local visits. Well, if you can't get there from somewhere else, that changes who the non-local visits are going to be. So we gotta figure out something different than what we've been doing for the last 50 years in terms of some sort of mass transit out to our far-flung parks. Whether that's something that's done by the park implementing agencies or done by the council or some private partnership or what, we need some sort of like shuttles out to our far-flung, from out by Square Lake or Elm Creek or Lake Rebecca or Vermilion Highlands. How do we get people from this urban core out to those? Because otherwise, they really struggle to meet the regional goal of getting the non-local visits if only certain classes of people can get there. We haven't come up with a good answer for that yet.
I see two kind of missing parts important to me in this study. Plan and proposed. So this is 2050, so I'm guessing it's a 10-year plan. So I would like to see an age study here because that will give us a view of, how many seniors will be there, how many students will be in college. You can have a forecast of how many families are growing up, but I'm sure there is something because I know, that's what's happening in school. Every single teacher is retiring, right? So we're missing teachers, and I'm sure we could see a way to figure out that how it might look in 2050 in normal standards, obviously. Weird things happen like 2020, but in normal ways. And the other one that I would like to see, and I'm sure it's in between, all the squares, but it's the education behind it. And by education, I mean like people learn about why it's important natural resources, why we need to preserve them, what is housing, what are the regional systems, what is equity, because we work on this all the time and we know all the concepts and we understand it, but if we go outside and just talk to somebody anyways, they are gonna say, I don't know what you're talking about. So that's the two things that I would like to see in a plan. So it's a little more, grounded and more average humanly understandable. Like it's not like, I understand it's hard, but I think it will be nice if I can grant this to my then 20-year-old daughter, and she would say, oh, I understand what you mean on this plan, so I can see now. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm trying not to interject too much and give yourself, time to chat amongst each other, but I think one of the things I didn't do is kind of, we have reflect on the, I guess what you might call the utility of the plans.
Okay.
And the consistency of the language that we use, which isn't always, the same between policy realms, we kind of, like other organizations, we have struggled with being in silos, and so I think we're really trying, been working pretty diligently to kind of break down those silos and ensuring that when we talk about, say, a goal or a strategy or a policy, that we're really talking about the same thing, not an aspiration, not a value, but strategy is this. And so when we talk about a housing strategy or water resources strategy or parks acquisition strategy, we're kind of at the same level. Also with words like equity or resilience, that we have a working definition that makes sense to, I think, most people. And so in a plan that perhaps is more inspiring graphically and visually, maybe is infused with stories from the community about the kind of success that we've seen or parks that we've seen and that kind of thing. So just a little bit of
I like that.
Good.
I didn't know there could be that many acronyms.
Yeah, no, I think,
No?
clarity around language, plain English, I think that a lot of us really aspire to say only as much as we need to. If we need to say more, we do, or but not more than we need to get our point across. We're not explaining it to ourselves, we're explaining it to people that will use the plan to guide their work or to make choices.
No. Something.
Government's really good at acronyms. In my
There are
job,
so many.
I work for Minute, and one of the applications that we run is Minutes. They're totally different things. There's just an S on the end. You did raise another point that I thought of. The council generally has most of its roles laid out in statute, and we address those, and as such, everything we do is kind of built around that. And one of those things is the other levels of government we're used to dealing with are cities, counties, townships, regional rail authorities, park districts. And the one that we have talked a lot about, but doesn't really make its way into council policy much, is school districts.
Right.
We're talking about things like engaging youth, teaching them about our park systems and about issues like climate change, and when we get into also the economic growth and prosperity, that obviously depends on the future workforce and things like that. So everything across the board, somehow, when you're talking about 2050, depends on the people that are under 20 right now. And even if we don't have a statutory thing that ties into schools, what is the general council's role in connecting with that level of government in a way that we haven't really done before?
That's an interesting question. I mean, we certainly encourage, Lisa, pop in here. I'll take a stab at it. We certainly encourage school districts or local cities, which are kind of one of our primary set of stakeholders, to coordinate with their school districts to ensure that the planning is aligned, and that policy work considers. So that's maybe more specific. Yeah, go ahead. I'll stop talking.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
The council a long time ago, before my time, used to have a role in the oversight of school district plans and facility plans. And in the early 2000s, the legislature removed that role. I don't recall which year, but removed that role. And I don't recall the reasons for it, but it wasn't happening. In this last cycle, especially related to our housing policy, our staff worked really hard to engage the school districts and just engaging them on this is what local governments are doing as far as comprehensive planning, this is what they're going to ask you about, this is how we see it as being connected to your work and how your work is connected to ours. That was a lot of legwork to even find the right people to talk to within the district who had the time to even think about thinking 20 years in the future when they are thinking about just how am I gonna get through this semester or what's this next semester going to look like. Now, it's not to say that it isn't worth the effort, and it's certainly something that we wanna continue in this coming cycle of work, especially in this planning, regional planning effort and not just on the tail end of the, with the comprehensive planning effort. Because there, as you said, Chair, so there are a lot of connections all the way across what the school districts are doing with the youth is so integrated into just about every component of the goals and themes that ultimately will probably show up in our plan as well. So it's not something that's mandated, but it's something that is a lot more difficult than just engaging with our colleagues from our many agencies are here to be with us, or even with our state agency partners, so we know exactly who does what in which part of the district.
Right, and it's also a question of, are you engaging with staff or the elected school board members or both?
Yep.
Yes, Sue.
Mr. Chair, from a council member perspective, Peter Lindstrom and I, our districts, the bulk of, he represents more of the Roseville area school district than I do, but I do have a portion in my district, and we participate in a quarterly meeting that the school district holds with local and regional governmental officials, and it's very beneficial. It's always just an excellent meeting to be a part of. We don't get into formal planning, but we get to learn about the things that relate between the metro council in the region as well as with the school district. The other thing that we have in Ramsey County is the Ramsey County League of Local Governments, and you probably know a former member of that group. They do monthly meetings, and that includes school districts, city councils, med councils, state legislators, county commissioners, and it's always a very interesting conversation. So throughout the region, there are different kinds of configurations where there is at least a casual opportunity to interact with school districts.
So if I may interject, I do have one thing more to contribute along those lines. I think I see kind of two different relevant issues here. One might be the strength and quality of the what do you call K through 12 educational system, and ensuring that there's an appreciation for the particular environmental resources that we have in this community, in this region. And then as well as sort of thinking about workforce development, which is an important issue for our region's economy. And that certainly that starts in the later years of K-12 education, and then post-secondary institutions and workforce is, it is not something that we have direct control over, but we have research capabilities. We are very aware of our disparities related to workforce development and education and outcomes, which haven't always been what we had hoped for. So when we think about the income and wealth disparities, racial disparities in our region, if we were to correct those, if you will, that would be a significant boost to the regional economy. And if we do not, it's a significant risk as we become increasingly diverse. So if those disparities remain and our region becomes more diverse, we will have, greater, economic and social problems as a result. So certainly an imperative, I think, for us to frame it correctly. I mean, we have the tools that we have. We can talk about equity in our regional park system. We can talk about equity in terms of transportation access and that kind of thing. But we can also frame it up for our partners who work more directly on those issues.
Sure. Well, and that, it's not only the school districts, we have charter schools, private schools. I will reach out to the daycares and providers, and because then you can start when they are way younger. As a daycare provider, I can tell you, I appreciate if you give me a curriculum, I'll be happy to teach them things. And centers would love to have them do something. So, but it's just, also don't forget, you can always just put a sign on the park and explain me why do I have to take care of the water. It will be just as simple as a cartoon and kids will love it, or you will understand it. So it's just, I know we're working on it. I know, I have hope.
Sue?
The only thing I was gonna add was we might wanna think about nonprofits in terms of a connector for the youth and parks and the school experience in parks. Because a lot of times they're the well, FMR might be a good example, or there's an organization called the National Park Trust. Although they're based in DC, they've been here several times to provide outdoor experiences for kids. And those nonprofits many times are kind of flying under the radar, and we don't even realize that they're bringing those learning opportunities to our regional or city or national parks. So it would be good to.
Like Girl Scouts and the Scouts now, they spend all the time outdoors. Yep. So I don't know how to connect all that together, but I think it will be worth it.
Maybe what would help is to have kind of an online reference for educators to be able to turn to.
Yep.
I want to give my third graders, an outdoor experience. A few years ago, I participated in a National Park Trust experience over at the Vento Nature Sanctuary, and it was the sweetest thing because this fourth grader came up to me and he's like, Mrs. Vento, I just saw a grasshopper. And I asked him, have you ever seen a grasshopper before? And he said, no, and I even touched it. But, we got a lot of kids that are nature deprived, and to the extent that we could maybe through MPOS be a connector
To parks.
to help fill that gap.
Well, you're talking a lot about youth, and I was struck by the comments about the litter and the experience with litter creating, like in terms of stewardship, and then also how racism and equities come into play, where people go into spaces that are, not welcoming. So that was really I think that was a really powerful story. But I also know a 53-year-old white guy who needs more outdoor experiences. So if you have any ideas for him, just feel free to share those with me now or afterward. I will pass them along to my friend.
I've seen with other larger agencies the idea of actual attendance at these other governments. So like an administrator or a park ranger, forest ranger, district ranger, going to planning commissions, going to school districts, and actually almost adopting their service area local governments and making an effort to bring them in there and invite them directly. I don't know if that's something that our implementing agency partners would be up for, but if you have a park superintendent who has a little bit of time during the day to stop by an elementary school and say, hi, I'm your neighbor, this park down the street. We have these opportunities for you to come get engaged and bring a little show and tell or something. It'll be pretty exciting.
I feel like you guys are talking a lot about, excuse my informal language, you're talking a lot about values right now in terms of the importance of respecting the environment, being involved in the environment, outreach to help foster respect for the environment and participation in outdoor activities that enhance people's well-being. So appreciate hearing about that.
Okay. We should probably move on for today, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again a bit more. Oh.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
From the audience? Jonathan Fleming, Three Rivers Park District. Is there any intent to bring together the 10 implementing agencies and help develop these values and vision, and then later the goals, the strategies and tactics?
Would you like to take a stand?
I can. Jonathan, we are really looking to create the regional development guide in concert with the regional parks policy plan. I mean, there is an order here in terms of like the regional development guide is setting the agenda, but I think that they can inform us as a regional parks, collective, and we can help inform them. So I think it is a two-way street. So
Yeah.
We can think about that.
And I really see the role of parks and especially the agencies in this case. It's, you own the wastewater system, you own the transportation system. The agencies own the park system. We need to be at the table now, basically.
Yeah.
It's very important because once these things have been boiled down, brought in after they've been boiled down, we will have lost our voice. For example, education discussion. There's a tremendous amount of work being done between agencies and school districts.
Yeah.
And we need to bring the expertise in of the educators to help flesh out those ideas. My only other question is, what is the water issue that's listed? Water issue exploration.
It's on the timeline.
Yeah, it's on the timeline.
Oh,
Is that groundwater or?
water issues, groundwater, sorry, I stole this slide from somewhere. Water issue exploration, the various dimensions of water resources in the region.
Okay.
So, you know,
Water
certainly
recycling.
groundwater contamination, infiltration, surface water management, chloride. You know, I believe there's maybe, I don't know how, 9 white papers that are under development, I think it's 9 or something.
That's
Yeah.
great. And
Yeah,
my one recommendation on this, having done many vision-y type plans, is keep it simple and have a strong focus
Yeah.
that everyone can relate to. I look at a lot of the words are like, you know, keep words, the words I would use, you know, never use words that I use, you know, those are the wrong words when talking to real people. So, yeah, and it would be good to have it simplified and boiled down, and maybe water is actually your thing. I'm also super interested in your scenario planning, because this is epochal change right now. I mean, the last time we had a massive pandemic, cars beat out streetcars. What's gonna happen in our transportation system? Are we going to move to a more decentralized node model? We'll still have a healthy downtown, and it'll be its own thing, but are we gonna have many different suburban workplaces, shared workplaces with all the services? And we need to figure that out because we need to figure out our active transportation system and the last mile system. And I don't know, these are really interesting times with these involved.
will do. Yeah, look forward to it.
Thanks for your comments. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
See you again, Marty. With that, we'll get to our reports here. I guess the big one for me to point out is at this point for our September meeting, we did a poll and we do have a response of quorum, but just barely. So if you said you could be there in September, we're gonna really need you to be there.
Not your vote, Monica, it's no.
Yeah, so we'll have to make sure we,
So you're really just talking to me?
and the people that are clearly going to watch our video later.
Right.
Yes.
Definitely.
But yeah, we'll have to follow up with everyone to make sure
What
that.
do you mean
we
later
actually-
than I'm watching live? Of course.
I'm assuming if they're not here, it's because they have something else going on. They
Yeah,
can't watch
right.
live.
It must be the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but there's that. Other commissioner reports,
Nada.
okay? The liaison, I think, just left, maybe.
Yeah.
Sue? No, her stuff's still here. Well,
You got to get a phone call.
okay. Staff reports.
Well, we're gonna really nail down this next meeting, September 1st. If we don't have a quorum, we'll move the date. But I'll check in with everyone. Sandy and I think we still have it. Bob said he'd delay his vacation if we needed it. So we might just call that in. But the September 1st meeting will be at the Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park in Washington County. I know, Monica, think about it. Could be a vacation to Washington County.
I'm honestly, it's a medical emergency in my family and I might fly down to Mexico for 10 days or so. So it all depends on the day, you know.
Okay.
But I will let you know as soon as I can. If you delete it 1 week, it might work for me, you know.
Okay. We will keep you posted and we thank Washington County. The only other thing, and this will be quick, is the council is working on a climate action plan for the internal workings of the council. The regional park system is kind of nuanced in that, as Jonathan just reminded us, The agencies own and operate the system, but the council has a support and sort of an umbrella function. But we have an opportunity to participate in small group discussions on the climate action plan. It will include focused conversations with peer agencies and environmental thought leaders. I just wanted to say that. There are 2 opportunities. One's in person at 9 a.m. on September 28th. One is a virtual event at 9 a.m. on September 29th. I'm going to send all this information out to the commissioners. So, but we'd love for your participation if you were interested. So those are my 2 updates. September 1st is the date right now, but we will confirm it, and if not, we'll move it. So.
Okay. Sue, did you have any reports? Okay. All right. Well, with that, we are ready to adjourn then. Thanks for sticking around, everybody that could.
Thank you, everyone. Take some